What if you could hear someone's final thought right before they end their life? Picture this. You're alone in a quiet room. No noise, no distractions. Just a single button in front of you. If you press it, you hear the last sentence inside someone's mind. Right before they decide to die. Not something dramatic. Not something poetic. No filter, no performance. Just raw thought, exactly as it is. So here's the real question. Do you press it? Because we all carry a simple assumption about suicide. We tell ourselves it's about weakness, about people who gave up, people who couldn't handle life. It's a comfortable story. It creates distance, makes us feel safe, like it could never be us or anyone close to us. But what if that story is wrong? What if what you hear feels familiar, uncomfortably familiar? Imagine the voice says, "I'm tired of pretending to be strong," or "I don't want to die. I just don't want to feel like this anymore." Or something even quieter. "I don't see a way out." No anger, no chaos, just exhaustion, deep, heavy exhaustion. Does that still sound like weakness? Or does it sound human? This is where it shifts, where it gets uncomfortable. Because if you really listen, you start to notice something. Fragments of those thoughts. You've had them too. Maybe not as deep, maybe not as long, but they were there, for a moment, for a day. And suddenly, the line disappears. The line between them and us. Now the question changes. It's not, why did they do it? It becomes something else, something closer. How close are we, really? Because this isn't about the act. It's about a state of mind, something that builds slowly, quietly. Like pressure, you don't see it, but it keeps rising. Psychology points to something important. Many people who attempt suicide don't actually want to die. They want relief. Relief from the pain. That's not the same thing. But from the outside, it looks identical. So imagine this. You're trapped in a room, and it's filling with water, slowly, relentlessly. You don't want to die. You just want to breathe. You just want a way out. And if the only door you can see looks like the end, you might take it. Now imagine you actually hear it. That exact moment. The second someone believes there are no doors left. What do you do with that? Do you judge them? Or do you feel the urge to open a door? This is where the idea becomes dangerous. Because if we could truly hear people's final thoughts, everything would change. Not because we'd become smarter, but because we'd lose the ability to pretend. No more "I didn't know." No more "they seemed fine." You would hear it, clear, undeniable, and that changes responsibility. But here's the darker side. What happens when you hear too much? Not once, not twice. Every day, all the time. Quiet voices of exhaustion. Thoughts that sound empty. A silence that feels heavy. At first, maybe you care more. You feel more. You want to help. But then something shifts. Because humans have limits. And empathy has limits too. When the mind is flooded with too much pain, it starts to defend itself. Not in a dramatic way, in a subtle one. You begin to ignore it. You normalize it. Or worse, you slowly pull away. And now you're stuck. Because this creates a paradox. The more you understand, the harder the choice becomes. Do you keep caring and risk breaking? Or do you protect yourself and stop feeling as much? At that point, it's no longer just about them. It's about you and what you're willing to carry. Now bring it closer. Closer than you're comfortable with. Make it personal. Imagine one day you hear that voice, but this time you recognize it. It's your friend, your family, someone who was laughing with you just yesterday. What do? Do you believe it, or do you push it away? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. In real life, we already hear fragments of that voice, not through some supernatural ability, through ordinary words. Simple sentences like, "I'm really tired," or "I don't know what to do anymore." Nothing dramatic. Nothing alarming on the surface. And most of the time, we let it pass. We treat it as normal. Not because we don't care, but because we're used to it. Used to thinking people are strong. Used to assuming they'll be fine. So we don't pause, we don't look deeper, but this isn't really about hearing thoughts. That's just the hook. This is about something much simpler, much more real. The willingness to truly listen. Because if you pay attention, people rarely hide everything. They leave traces, small ones, clues in how they speak, half-finished sentences, subtle changes in behavior, tiny signals, easy to miss, easy to ignore. And that's the real problem. It's not that the signals aren't there. It's that we don't treat them like they matter. So now we return to the question, the one we started with. What if you could hear someone's final thoughts before they end their life? Maybe it would break something. The illusion that this only happens to certain people, that it's distant, rare, far from us. But maybe it would do something else too. Force us to change, to slow down, to notice, to listen, not just reply. Because in the end, the most unsettling part isn't the final thought. It's this. We may have already heard an earlier version of it and missed it completely. So now the question shifts. It's no longer, what if we could hear it? It becomes something quieter, more uncomfortable. If we already have, would we recognize it? Because if we're honest, we don't always pay attention. Not really, not fully, not because we don't care, but because we move too fast, too quick to label it as just tired, too quick to move on, too quick to say, it'll pass. And in that moment, we miss what actually matters. Because what's needed there isn't advice, not a solution, just something simple. We pause, we stay, and for once, we truly listen. Most people don't need perfect words. They don't need a life-changing speech. They need something simpler, someone who stays, someone who doesn't treat their pain like a problem to fix, but something to sit with. Because sometimes, what pulls someone closer to that final thought isn't just the pain, it's being alone with it. Completely unseen, completely unheard. Imagine this. You're surrounded by people. They're laughing, talking, living. But inside your head, everything feels heavy, distant, disconnected. And every time you try to hint at it, it slips past them. Everyone feels that way sometimes. Just be strong. You'll get through it. Those words aren't cruel. They're normal. But at the wrong moment, they don't comfort. They close a door, quietly. Now flip it. Just a small shift. Someone pauses, really looks at you, and says, "Hey, you don't seem okay. Want to talk?" No pressure, no fixing, no judgment, just an open door. And that moment, as small as it looks, can interrupt something dangerous. Because suddenly, something re-enters the room. Possibility, and that's the core of it. That final thought doesn't appear out of nowhere. It grows when possibility disappears, when the future feels sealed. No exits, no alternatives, just the same pain, repeating. So maybe the real power isn't hearing someone's last sentence. Maybe it's catching the earlier ones, the quiet ones, the ones that don't sound urgent, the ones we usually ignore. Because that's where things can still change, where the story isn't finished, where a different ending is still possible. And here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. Sometimes you're not the one listening. You're the one leaving the traces. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just small shifts, a little quieter than usual, a little less energy, a sentence that never quite finishes. And maybe someone noticed, but hesitated. They weren't sure if it mattered, weren't sure if they should ask, weren't sure if you even wanted to be heard. And that leads to something easy to avoid, a quiet realization. This isn't just about saving others. It's also about allowing yourself to be seen. Because connection doesn't work one way. It's not just strength, it's honesty. The kind that says, "I'm not okay right now." And that's hard, because it goes against everything we're taught. Be strong, handle it yourself. Don't burden anyone. But what if that belief is part of the problem? What if strength isn't staying silent? What if it's letting someone stand next to you while you carry it? Now go back to the button. The one that lets you hear someone's final thought. At first, it feels powerful, almost like something you shouldn't have access to. But maybe we've been asking the wrong question. It's not about whether you would press the button. It's this. Why do we wait for something that extreme before we decide to listen? Because in reality, there is no button, no sudden access, no dramatic final moment handed to us. There are only ordinary days, ordinary conversations, ordinary chances to notice something small and choose not to ignore it. And maybe that's enough. Not to fix everything, not to stop every tragedy, but to make fewer people feel like they've run out of doors. So the next time you hear something subtle, a sentence that feels heavier than it should, a silence that lingers just a little too long, pause. Not because you have the perfect words, but because you chose to stay. Because your presence might be the one thing that reminds them there's still another way out. And sometimes that's all it takes to shift a thought just slightly before it ever becomes the last one.